There she is. Hey, Carissa. Can you hear me?
I'm gonna spotlight her.
Can't see you or hear you at this point.
Can you hear
Oh,
me now? Oh, sorry.
yes. I can see
Okay.
you and I can hear you.
Okay.
Hi, Carissa.
Uh,
Hi, nice to meet you. Hold on, let me just. Okay, there we go. Sorry, it's like very like my Flux is on and it's just yeah. Okay.
Hope you had a cup of coffee or something.
I I did not, but it's okay. I just yeah. I don't normally drink coffee, so I don't actually have coffee in the house.
I believe
Um,
it's the early in the morning, right?
yeah, it's 5:50 right now.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I was
gotta.
just half joking. Yeah, I was just since it's so early.
Yeah. No, but I normally, yeah, I was like thinking about it while I was brushing my teeth. I was like, I should drink coffee. But like I normally don't drink coffee, but because like I am very sensitive to caffeine. But I was like, this is a situation where coffee would be okay, but I actually don't have coffee in the house. So
Okay. Welcome. So the way we normally run it is that normally one of us, in this case Indira, is gonna give an announcement about the Queen's Library program that we're having. And
okay,
then I'm gonna read your bio.
okay,
And then usually we go into a reading after that.
okay,
That's up to you, but usually about like maybe
yeah,
10 minutes or so, and then we can
okay,
go into a Q&A.
okay.
Um, I did have a question because I noticed in your bio, it says something about the fact that this was a Good Morning America, book club pick, and you were on there. So I don't know if you want me to mention that after the bio or I don't have to
Sure,
mention it.
sure. I
Okay,
yeah, I
all right.
just I'd never updated my bio after
All right, no worries.
after
Yeah,
all that
yeah.
happened, so I just forgot.
So I'll include that as I'm kind of introducing your reading, I guess. And
Yeah, sure.
yeah, and yeah, and then we have.
Cool.
I mean, I have the questions your publicist sent me, and I, did create my own questions too. And Deer has some questions, and then we usually we get a bunch of questions from the audience. We usually kind of intersperse it throughout.
Okay,
So yeah.
cool.
Do you have any other questions about it?
No, my only question is, am I supposed to also have this background that you guys all
I
have?
could send it to you, but it's 5 minutes till the thing, so probably
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
forward it to you if you want, but yeah, I don't it's not necessary.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
I
I
actually
was like,
didn't have it till
oh,
now either, so yeah,
okay,
it's a newbie for me as well.
okay. I was like, oh, wait, I missed a memo somewhere.
Generally, we start the program around like 6:03,
Okay.
and
Yeah,
we
wait
give
for some people to come in.
for more people to sign in,
Yeah.
and then we he already told you what we do.
Okay, perfect.
So, how long you are going to read it for? Like
I've never timed the reading.
approximately
It's
like 15,
probably
20.
no, it's probably like 5 minutes.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, I always do the same reading and it's not quite, it's like 3 pages long, so it's probably takes about 5 minutes. Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
How are you feeling, by the way? I know you haven't been feeling so
I
well recently.
Yeah, I caught shingles while I was at AWP, or I didn't catch it. I guess I was stressed out. And then I've just been sick for 2 months in a row for like straight without like every single week I'm sick because I also
Yes.
have a toddler and
Right, yeah, yeah.
he just started preschool in like February, and so like he brings home a new illness every week, and so
Yeah.
I've gotten stomach flu from him, I've gotten strep throat from him, and then
Wow.
like just a variety of colds, and then I think because of all of that I got shingles, and then after my shingles is almost gone, like my scalp still is itchy. I got it on my scalp, and so my scalp still itches a
Oh,
little bit,
wow.
but then I got another cold from him. So
Yeah.
he actually went to the emergency room earlier this week, and yeah, it's been a week. It's been a couple months. So
I'm
yeah.
sorry to hear that. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. As I said, I had shingles as well, before the pandemic, and It
Yeah.
wasn't fun.
Yeah, yeah,
Thankfully, I
it's
didn't have it on my scalp. I had it on my chest and on my back, which
yeah. I
wasn't
think
fun
that's more
either. But
common.
yeah,
That tends to be more common, but I think for whatever reason, like most people I told, they were like, "You got it on your scalp? Like, how did that happen?" I was like, "I have no idea." But I started getting like these like shooting, stabbing
yeah,
headaches, and I was like, "Oh."
yeah. It's
So
in the nerve, so it's really painful, even if you have
yeah,
a relatively light case. But yeah,
yeah,
I'm glad you're feeling mostly better.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It
how
wasn't.
how was APWP? I missed it this year.
It was fine. It was my first time going since the pandemic.
Okay.
So it was just nice to like see friends and things. But like I said, because of the shingles had started happening, I ended up going to urgent care like a few times. And so
Oh my God.
so I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna miss the morning because I have to go to urgent care." So yeah, it was fine. It was fun, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Do you come back to just curious, do you come back to New Jersey or NYC that often, or is it mostly in Taiwan these days?
I come back like maybe a couple times a year with like, for like Christmas maybe, and then like summer sometimes if I can, but like probably less going forward now because with the kid, it's actually like really hard. The flight is really long and it's kind of torturous with a small child to fly for that long. So, I used to go back a lot before I had a child, but like now with the kid, we're probably only gonna go back a year at a time, maybe. Yeah.
Or we could, if you want, we could delve into that as well. I mean, because the characters are obviously going back and forth, like not only in time but also in place. But obviously, you have two places that you kind of live in for the most part. But
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it does inform, I guess, some of my writing, but yeah. Yeah, we could totally talk about it if that's of
yeah,
interest.
well, yeah. I mean, there's plenty to talk about. So yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see if we get to it.
Okay.
Okay. So it's almost
Um,
6. I think we'll probably wait a couple of
yeah,
minutes, right, Asper?
yeah, but I think we should let them know, and then we're going to tell them that we are going to start in 3 minutes. How about that?
Okay.
Okay, so let me
So we're
allow
gonna
them.
let people in. Okay.
Yes. Hello, everyone. It's 6 o'clock, but we are going to take 2 or 3 more minutes just to allow other people to sign in. So we are going to start around 6:03. Thank you. In the meantime, in the chat, if you can write where are you from, so that would be really nice. Thank you.
For everyone who's joining us, we're just waiting about a minute to start. We're going to start in about a minute, 6:03. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for another Literary Thursday. I hope everyone is doing well this evening. My name is Indira Mukherjee. I'm the Assistant Manager, Information Access Services at the Central Library of Queens. Before my colleague Tejas Desai introduces tonight's author, I would like to provide you with some Queens Public Libraries announcements. Explore the universe at Queens Public Library. This April, QPL celebrates the culture of space exploration all month long. Join us for space themed science and art programs for kids, fascinating NASA presentations, and much more. Please visit queenslibrary.org to learn more about Space Month at the library. April is National Poetry Month. Join us for our virtual and in person programs, including open mics, author talks, and writing workshops. We have got something planned for the poets in everyone. Visit queenslibrary.org to learn more. Over to you, Tejas.
Thank you very much, Indira. I'm Tejas Desai. I'm the assistant manager at Cambridge Heights Library, and it's my pleasure to introduce our author today. Ms. Carissa Chen is a Fulbright Fellow, Kundiman Fellow, Fiction Fellow, and a Bona Voices Fellow, whose fiction and essays have appeared in The Atlantic, Eater, The Cut, Long Reads, PEN America, Catapult, Gulf Coast, and Guernica, among others. She's awarded an Artist Fellowship from the New Jersey Council on the Arts, as well as residences at Malay Colony, where she was a Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation Creative Fellow, the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, Kimmel Harding Nelson Center, the Ragdale Foundation, and Woolapa Bay Air. She was formerly the senior fiction editor at the Rumpus and currently serves as the editor-in-chief at Hyphen Magazine. She's received an MFA in fiction from Sarah Lawrence College and splits her time between New Jersey and Taipei, Taiwan. Homeseeking is her debut. And just to mention as well, Carissa her book, Homeseeking, was recently selected as a Good Morning America book club pick, and she was on Good Morning America. Congratulations about that. And yeah, I think thank you for being here, Carissa. We really appreciate it. And I think if you would like, you can start off with a brief reading.
Thank you so much, Tejas. I'm getting a thing that says that my mic is disabled. Is it actually
We can
disabled?
hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you
Okay.
very well.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I don't know why it says my mic has been disabled. Okay, great. I'm gonna just start with a short little reading. It's from somewhere in the beginning. Okay. All right. January 2008, Los Angeles. A chorus of violins ushered Suchi into Howard's life for the third and final time. Mozart's Violin Concerto No. 5 in A major, celebratory and elegant, floated out of muffled speakers in the 99 Ranch Market, its golden jubilation incongruous with Howard's mood, the blank haze of gray he'd been living in since he'd buried Lin Yi 16 months earlier. He glanced up from the bananas he was inspecting to search for the source of his irritation. Instead, he saw her. She was picking up Korean melons, their skins the color of lemon curd. He watched her knock on them with her knuckles, her head bent to listen. Howard was sure it was Suchi this time, but he had mistaken so many women for her over the last 4 decades. Women with cheekbones like hers, gaits like hers, but who transformed into other people when he approached. He stood transfixed. This woman's face was plump and sagging. Her hair was thin and gray at the roots. But her eyes never changed, he had once heard someone say, and hers, caramel and bright, were every bit as intense as he remembered, even in the task of selecting the ripest melon. "Excuse me," he said hesitantly in Mandarin, and she glanced up. Her eyes widened. "Wang Haiwen?" The name came out carefully, more statement than a question. For a moment he couldn't respond. He was a child again, a teenager again, not in this American supermarket, but in the alleyways of their youth. He gripped the handle of his shopping cart, feeling the bite of plastic where it was uneven. "So it is you," he said. "Wang Haiwen," she said, more briskly this time, a confirmation. She smiled, revealing teeth too straight and white to be real. He pulled his cart alongside hers. His, empty aside from 3 bunches of bananas, hers, already filled with various greens, tomatoes, a box of Asian pears, and a daikon radish. "You live here now?" he asked. It was a dumb question. He didn't know what else to say. "I moved in with my son and daughter-in-law a couple years ago," she answered in Shanghainese. A jolt ran through him. Howard had not heard his childhood language in several years, and it caused in him an aching relief, the sensation reminiscent of a sour candy his granddaughter had once given him. "They said they needed help with the grandchildren," Suchi continued, "but to be honest, I think they worried I was getting lonely, living all alone." Howard understood that loneliness. Each morning he woke up to an empty house and expected to hear Lin Yi in the kitchen, pots clanging, a mug being washed, a soap opera keening on the television set. Instead, hear nothing but the breeze in the trees, or a lone pigeon purring, or the neighbors mowing their lawn. "And you?" Suchi asked. "Have you lived in Los Angeles long?" "We've been here for about 30 years," Howard responded in Shanghainese, then inwardly revised. Not we anymore. I. Suchi's eyes grew soft. "And your wife?" Had he become that transparent? Did every thought of Linyi paint itself across his face whether or not he wanted it to? "Linyi passed away a little over a year ago," he said quietly. She murmured a sound of condolence. She reached out and touched his arm. He stared down at the back of her hand, at the age spots dotting her dark blue veins. One splotch of chipped coral polish remained on her pinky nail. He remembered she'd had beautiful hands, once. "Pneumonia," he said in response to the question she hadn't asked. But really, Parkinson's. Suchi retracted her hand. "I wish I could have met her," she said. "I would have liked that," he answered, and they both said nothing for a while, letting each of their kind lies mingle and hang in the air. Suchi broke the silence. "You must love bananas." She looked pointedly into his shopping cart. "They help with digestion," he said with mock defensiveness. "I recall you having an extremely efficient digestive system." "I don't know about you, but things don't work quite as well as they did when we were kids. Getting old has been a disappointment." Suchi laughed, full-bellied and open-mouthed. Her laughter sounded exactly as he recalled, like spring rain upon glass. "It's so nice to hear you laugh," he said, and immediately regretted the sentimentality of the words. "And it's nice to see you, Haiwen." "People call me Howard now. Easier for the Americans to pronounce." "How-would," she pronounced slowly. Not so easy for a Chinese person to pronounce. And yet, even my Chinese friends know me as Howard. "Wasn't that the name they gave you at that missionary school? I thought you hated it." He was surprised. Even he'd forgotten the origin of his English name. "I couldn't think of another one," he said. "Now I'm used to it." Lucky for me, my name is easy for Americans. Many people just call me Sue. She shook her head and smiled. I must be going now, she said. She plucked a melon from the mountain before her and made a show of wrapping it. You should buy a melon. They sound promising. Howard was pulling the car out of the lot when it occurred to him that neither of them had asked for the other's contact information. He wasn't sure if he was relieved or sorry. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you very much, Carissa. Just for those of you who haven't read the book, I believe that that passage is from near the beginning of the book, right? And it's
Yes.
set in Los Angeles, I believe in 2008. But that's where this couple kind of re-meets basically. But much of the rest of the book is set throughout periods of time. In 1947, throughout the 70s and 80s, with this couple kind of they fall in love and they kind of meet and re-meet, and you go through different phases. That's basically around the Chinese Civil War and that conflict. So I'm just curious, what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah. So the spark for this book, or at least for the background around surrounding this book, really came in 2005 for me. My grandfather had just passed away, and so had my grandmother. And so me and my family were cleaning out their things, and we came across this photograph of my grandfather weeping in front of her grave. It was his mother's grave, which I didn't know immediately at the time. But he was crying, and I'd never seen my grandfather cry like that in life. He was sort of a not totally stoic, but not very emotional man. And so to see him weeping was really moving to me, and I really wanted to know sort of more of the context around that. I found out that when he was 19 years old, he had been separated from his mom. He had come to Taiwan, and not knowing that he would be gone for a long time, the Chinese Civil War ended, China won, and he wasn't able to go back to China for about 40 years, in which time his mother had passed away. And for me, that was really moving. I wasn't much older than him at the time. I was probably like 21, 22, and I couldn't imagine what that was like, to be separated from your parents and not know that that was on the horizon. And I did a little bit more research, and I found out that, wow, like, his story wasn't unique. There were actually over 2 million people who left China after the end of the Chinese Civil War and had gone to Taiwan either with the military or because they had family in the military, or, just bad luck. Or, they made that conscious decision, but they all thought the war wasn't over, that, this is like a temporary sort of fleeing, and they would push back and eventually, go back to China. And for a lot of them, that wasn't the case. And they, like my grandfather, were separated from their families for decades, often permanently, because, people pass away and things like that. And it just, I couldn't stop thinking about sort of the heartbreak at the center of that, how these people must have felt, how homeless they must have felt too, to be in this new country where they didn't know people, and having to rebuild from scratch, and the whole time like just longing for your family. Like, it's not like today where we have the internet and Facebook or texting or whatever, right, to check in with family. Like, you just didn't know what was happening. So that really was sort of the beginning of my interest in this history. And it took me a long time to figure out how to write about it, but um I knew that it was something that I really wanted to explore, especially because I hadn't seen it really written that much about in Western media.
Right, right. I also want to ask you about the structure of the book, because there's a very interesting structure where we're getting kind of like it's kind of based around the couple, right? Sushi and Haiwan, and we're kind of getting Sushi's chronicle kind of forward and Howard's chronicle kind of backwards. So what was the reason to choose that structure? And is that something you chose, or is it something that kind of developed through rewrites, or how did that develop, and how did you decide on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm a very structure-based person. It often, writing doesn't make sense to me until I've sort of figured out the structure. And when I started writing this book, I didn't know what the structure was. I was sort of writing wherever my interests pulled me. So I didn't write it chronologically or like, in the order that it is in the book. I was sort of writing, I wrote parts in the present, or, the contemporary parts, the 2008 parts. I wrote a bunch of stuff in the past. I wrote, you know, something from two points of view that was in like the 1960s, and I didn't know why I was doing that. And I got really stuck at a certain point because I was like, I don't even know where I'm going. Like, why am I writing these particular pieces? Like, what is happening with the story that I'm writing? And I was at this residency called Ragdale, and I was, if you don't know what residencies are for the audience, it's like you go away for like a month, you're fed, you like live in this room or cabin or whatever, and you're supposed to write the whole time and get like a lot of writing done. And, I had a month there, and I was like watching the days tick by where I wasn't getting any writing done because I didn't know what I was doing. And I was listening to a lot of music at the time because, I did, what else are you doing when you're not writing? And I was listening to this musical called The Last 5 Years, which just, many of you might know, has recently been revived on Broadway with Nick Jonas of all people. But at the time it was this like cult favorite, and I was listening to it, and it has a structure where it's about a couple that's getting divorced, and it starts with the woman singing about the end of her marriage, and then the next song is the man singing about their first date, and then it kind of alternates like that until they like meet in the middle and they get married, and then the last songs are like him singing about the end of the marriage and her singing about their first date. So it has that kind of structure, and I was listening to it a lot, and suddenly like it just clicked for me at one point. I was like, wait, what if I applied this to my book? And I thought about it, and it worked with like the pieces that I had already written, but it also made a lot of sense thematically for me, right? Because I was writing this book about two people who are really fixated on their past and their traumas and their memories in a really different way, right? And their survival techniques. And for Suchi, she has this attitude of like, why do we fixate on the past at all? Like, I need to try to not think about it. I need to move forward in my life. That is the only way to survival, is to move forward. Um, and meanwhile, Hywin was very much like combing through his past, like thinking about the people that he had lost, like not wanting to lose any of that, and not being able to let it go. And I was like, that kind of is very elucidated in this particular kind of structure. And so I tried it out with the existing pieces I had, and it seemed to work really well. And then I was like, that's it. Once I had the structure, I was like, boom, boom, boom. I know exactly, what I need to write. It still took me a very long time after that to finish writing the book, but at least like I knew where I was going. Whereas before I felt like I was like feeling my way around in the dark.
Wait, I know you mentioned music there. I know in the book, Haiwan is a musician. Specifically, he plays the violin, and then the violin becomes kind of an important object in the book as well. Is there a reason you made him a musician? And what's the significance of the violin and also of the music throughout the book? There's so many mentions of different symphonies, and
Mm.
the book is structured like a symphony, right? So yeah, what's how did you get inspired to do that?
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm not someone who like writes with a preconceived notion of what my characters are going to be like. I kind of just write and see what happens, and they let them reveal themselves to me on the page. And that was the case for Haiwen and Suchi. I was writing, and all of a sudden he was a violinist, and I was like, oh, okay, he has this hobby. And then as I was writing further, I was like, oh no, it's not just a hobby, he's very serious about it. And to me it's kind of like meeting my characters for the first time, and like, they're like real people to me, and they're, it's me trying to be like, okay, who are you? um and once I realized that he was a violinist, it made a lot of sense to me because I was thinking about the fact that, music is very, I think it's very grounding to us in terms of like our memories and like our past and home and all those things. Like, if I think about like if I hear, Britney Spears' Baby One More Time, which came out when I was 16 years old, I am like immediately transported back to, right? Like you like hear it and you're like, oh, what was I feeling when I was like 16? All my teenage angst, like who did I have a crush on back then, or whatever it was, right? Like all those exact feelings like flood back to you. I think it has something to do with like the brain centers where like the the oral centers are very close to memory centers or something like that. I think I learned that in neurobiology. But I think it's really interesting. And I was like, for somebody who thinks about his past so much, and who is so nostalgic and sentimental in a way, it would make sense for him to also be deeply connected to music, right? And then he's introverted, and so like this is his way of making sense in the world. And I think because of that, I also realize, Suchi also wants to be a singer, though she's not quite as serious about it as he is. But for these two people, like music holds all the significance of being something that reminds them of particular times and places of their childhood and their past, and it brings up all these feelings for them. And so it became, even though it wasn't something that I set out to do when I started writing, um, it became something that became very important and became a through line and like a grounding thing for them throughout the book.
Cool, great. We do have a question in the chat, and by the way, for the audience, if you have any questions, please do write it in the chat, and we will go through them. We have a question. It says, from the epigraph, since I don't have the printed copy, characters change over time. If you, the listener, find yourself confused, take a moment to reflect, navigate, and forge onward. Such an impactful message. Will you speak more towards that, please?
Yeah, I think they're referring to the note on languages that I have in the beginning. Um, for me, it was really important to make the language aspect of this book as accurate as possible. If anyone who is familiar with Sinitic languages knows, like the way that Chinese works is that the characters are all pretty much more or less the same with some variations between Sinitic languages, but it's mutually like legible, right? Like you can speak totally different Sinitic languages, but read the written language and understand. But how it is pronounced is really different depending on the language that you're speaking. And so I knew that even when they're moving within like, different Sinitic worlds, they would hear the same words differently, which means that their names were different, right? So like the same characters are pronounced multiple ways depending on which language is being spoken. And I was like, wow, that is like really unmooring, right? Like to go to a different place and all of a sudden the name that you've been used to hearing yourself be pronounced by like your whole life is suddenly pronounced really differently. And it's like often not like a small change. It's like can be a pretty big change in language difference or in pronunciation. And I was like, that's like one thing that is really unmooring. And obviously on top of that, I use different languages because again, I was like, I want to be really accurate in reflecting how wherever they move through the world, that they have to get used to hearing a different language and like not understanding what people are saying and trying to acclimate to that. And I wanted that experience to, I mean, I started out from a place of just wanting to be accurate to their experience. But as I was writing about it, I was also really conscious of like, this might be confusing for some people and it might be challenging and it might be a reason that like people don't want to engage with the text, which I can understand. But the more I thought about, the more I was like, okay, but that's not a reason for me not to do what I want to do, because in some ways it very accurately reflects the experience of being an immigrant, of being somebody who goes to a new place and all of a sudden nothing is intelligible to you anymore, to like have to get used to that. And if you have never been in that situation, then in some ways you're very privileged. You've been very lucky to never have to navigate that particular humiliation, that particular, confusion. And so I felt the need to have to like write this note and kind of set people's expectations and be like, listen, things might be a little bit challenging, but in some ways, like this then will give you the most, accurate way of understanding what these characters are going through, just a taste of what they have to deal with, which is just on the language front. If you find this confusing, where like maybe 10% of the words are things that you don't understand, or you have to code switch a little bit, then imagine what it might be like to actually have to live through this experience. So that was a really important part, to me. And I feel like, based on reader feedback that I've heard, like it has been okay for most people. Although I know that some people might find it confusing, but I am heartened to know that, like, most people have been able to be like, okay, let me just move through this and like get used to it and it'll be fine.
Thank you so much. I have a question. I was wondering who are some of the, I would say, like literary inspiration or your favorite author that you admire?
Yeah. Oh man. Every time I get this question, I'm like, I should have like a response by now. I should have something that I can like say really easily by now, but it is so hard because there are so many writers that I admire and so many writers that I really love. Um, Off the top of my head, one of the books that is really important to me is Anne Carson's autobiography of Red. It is a really slim volume, but it's like really poetic and really, really beautiful and moving. And like you can live in like every single sentence for like a really long time and just like I would savor each sentence. I really love Kazuo Ishiguro. His books have meant a lot to me in terms of, just learning how to write story and how he deals with his characters with like very, the utmost patience. I'm trying to think who else. Edwidge Danticat has been extremely influential to me. Especially her early works, her, book of short stories, Crick Crack, was something I read in college, and it was like one of the first things that I read that I was like, wow, like I want to be able to do this. Like I want to move people the way that this book has moved me. Um, oh my God, every time this happens, I'm like, like I'm like leaving somebody really important off. Okay, I already mentioned three people, so I'm going to stop that. I will also say that poetry means a lot to me too. I read a lot of poetry. I learn a lot from poetry on how to write well and how to evoke language and use language as best I can. So yeah, I read a lot of poetry. So I'll just stop there. I could go on for a very long time, but you know.
Piggybacking on that, this is your first novel, and you have written poetry, and you have an MFA, you've written stories, but how difficult was it to write a novel, and how many years did it take you? How many drafts did you go through? What was the process like in terms of the craft process?
Yeah. This took me a really long time to write because I had tried writing novels before and failed. Um, and I just, I did not know what I was doing. Like I said, I had no idea, what the structure was going to be like. I actually started writing this as a short story. I thought this was gonna be a short story. I thought it was gonna be like a quick, like 20 pages, and I had an idea. I was like, okay, they meet when they're old, and then we'll like flashback once, and then we'll like, whatever. And I wrote like 120 pages in the first 4 days because I was so like captivated by their story. And at around like 50 pages, I was like, okay, maybe this is like not a short story. Maybe it's like a novella. And like at 100 pages, I was like, oh no, I have written the beginning of a novel. So I didn't, after that, I kind of froze because I was like, oh no, it's a novel. Now what do I do? Um, and then it took me, I think I would say from like, I think I started writing the actual words, like, okay, not counting research, which also took me a long time before this, but writing in earnest, I started in 2017 and my book came out in 2025. So, that was almost 10 years. If you count in like the research and everything that I was doing, it took over a decade. I went through so many drafts. I can't even tell you how many drafts I did because I was constantly tinkering with everything. I rewrote like entire chapters, like in the 12th hour before sending to my agent or sending it out to agents. I didn't have an agent at the time. Um, and then I had to do more drafts with my agent and then again with my editor. So it was just like I mean, I probably did 20 something drafts of this, maybe. Um, it just took so long, and I hope that, if I write a second book, that it doesn't take nearly as long. But like, who knows? Like, I don't know how else to write a book. So, but I hear that every single time you start a new book, it's like learning to write all over again. So, who knows?
So I do have another question in the Q&A. And by the way, everyone, if you do have questions, preferably write them in the chat because we're not checking the Q&A part as much. But the question is, can you talk a bit about the research you did for this book? Beyond accuracy around historical events, it seems like it must have been challenging to get a sense of what daily life was like in the different times and places that figure in the book.
Yeah, yeah. That was one of the big things that I had to get over psychologically, because I think in the beginning I was kind of like, how am I going to write this? Who am I to write this when I didn't live in this time period? How can I ever accurately capture what it felt like? Um, and that was something that I was very worried about. Uh, so for me, my process was I read a lot. I read books written by people who lived in Shanghai at the time to really get a sense of like, well, what was their portrayal of it. I watched like films, so I read other people's, I saw other people's interpretation of that time. I, tried to watch some of like the old Shanghainese films that were actually produced at the time, but of course there probably was like a, their version of the Hollywood sheen on that. And I also read a lot of academic articles, which, you would think of as like, oh, like historians only cover like these big sweeping things, but like no, they cover like all the minutia too. So like I was reading a lot of academic books where they were like talking about like what daily life was like, what were the very specific things that people did when they got up in the morning. That entire prologue, that first opening is very much indebted to a particular historian who spent time writing about like, well, daily life was like in a shikumen. What did they do when they woke up? How did they, clean things? Like what kinds of vendors would come through, things like that. And, it was like the amalgamation of all these things of like getting all the specific details, but then also like, looking at other media to get a feeling of what that time period was like, that gave me the confidence, I guess, to do my own interpretation of it. Now, I will not say that like, if a person who lived in Shanghai at the time read my book, if they will be like, oh yeah, that was right. Like I can't tell you if that's true or not, but at least I hope I didn't get it too far off the mark, you know.
Did you have anybody read it who had lived in that time? I mean, like just like a beta reader or something like that. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I did not. I did ask, people, somebody who would have lived at the time is probably in their like
Probably,
90s
yeah,
now.
right.
So like I did verify a few questions with somebody who did live during that time to just be like, hey, like I have a specific question that I'm trying to figure out. Like, can you tell me XYZ? But I did not have them read the whole book. I did have a couple of historians read the book before I sent it to my agent, but yeah, besides that, I didn't.
Okay,
Right.
great.
I was wondering, did you always know how you're going to end the book
No,
from the
I
very
don't.
beginning, or you just kept on writing and it turned out that way?
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes, with short stories, when I've written short stories in the past, sometimes I know like how I want to end it. But in this case, I had no idea. I was like, okay, where are we going? What is going to be the end? And not just like, okay, like, for this particular book there were two endings, right? Like there's like the way that it ends, like chronologically, I guess, like what happens to these two people, but also like how did I want the book to end. And like I didn't know either of those things. Chronologically, I didn't know like up until the moment that Haiwen told Suchi that they had found his mother while I was writing it. I didn't know that they had found his mother. I was like writing, and I, along with Suchi, was like, oh, they found her mother. Like it was a surprise to me too when it appeared on the page, and I was like, okay. And then I was like, oh, as I was writing, I was like, of course, this is how it ends. Of course, this is the thing that finally sort of pushes her out of her state of denial in some ways. And so that of course. Then I revised it, to shape it into what it eventually was. But I had no idea until probably, I would say, the last year or two. I didn't know how it was going to end. And then the actual ending of the book, like the last chapter in that book, that chapter originally was in the middle. And it wasn't until I did some revisions, probably, when I was halfway through the novel, that I was like, I think this belongs at the end. And it hadn't made sense to me in the middle, but once I moved it to the end, I was like, this is right. I think this is the way that the book needs to end. And then I like very much fought for that ending. So yeah, for me, it's like a process of discovery. Writing is not something. I know some people who like outline everything before they start writing, and they like, know exactly like every beat of their book, and they're just like writing it out. For me, it is like not that at all. It is definitely like the Michelangelo, like, let me carve this thing out of the rock and like see what like person emerges, from this rock.
Thank you so much. There is a question. Actually, you probably you already answered it, but I think she was not able to join. She couldn't
Oh,
hear, so that's why probably she wrote it down. It says, "How long did it take you to write the book, and what or who was your inspiration?"
yeah. Yeah, I'll just go over this a little quickly because I don't want to, everyone else to
Yeah,
hear the same thing twice.
just yeah.
But this book took me, if I count when I started doing research, then it was like over a decade. If I count just like when I actually started writing the actual words that became this book, I started this in 2017. And like I said, what sparked this book was really my grandfather's story and how he was separated from his mom when he was 19 years old, and he wasn't able to go back to Shanghai until he was, until like 4 decades later.
Right. So just piggybacking a little bit on that, can you talk a little bit more? I'm sure there are aspiring writers in the audience. Just talk a little bit more about the publishing process, like how you got an agent for the book, your relationship with the editors, and how it shaped the book. I know you said, for example, you were fighting for that ending. I assume that means with the editors. So yeah, if you just talk a little bit more about that part.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so in terms of getting an agent, my current agent, she reached out to me. She was one of the first agents to ever reach out to me in 2015. I had published an essay with Vita, and she read the essay and she sent me an email, and she said, I'm really interested. I really like this essay. Are you writing anything longer? And at the time, I hadn't even started writing this book. I was only doing research. And so I said, I'm working on something, but it's probably not going to be ready for a while. Can I get back to you when I'm ready? And, she said, sure. And, other agents would reach out to me over the years, but this book took me a very long time. So I was always responding the same way, being like, sorry, still working. Can I get back to you when I'm ready? And my current agent, she actually reached out to me a couple times. We even had like coffee once at AWP, which is like a writers conference. Um, and I was always just like, I'm still working. And when I was finally done with this book, I felt like, I was ready to send it out to agents. Then I emailed everybody that had ever contacted me, and a couple of other agents that, I was interested in, just cold. And I said, I have this manuscript. I'm ready. Can I send it to you? And so, boom, out I went. And after people read it and things like that, I got my first offer, and I nudged everybody else, and eventually it was, a hard decision, but I went with my first agent. I felt like it spoke a lot to her, that she was interested from the very beginning, that she had followed my career so closely and had always kept in touch. And, I just got a really good vibe from her. I really liked her. And then, so we revised the book for a year, and then we sent it out to publishers, about a year after I had signed with her. And I sold this book within like a week or so on Preempt. And so I had a really lucky, like frictionless experience, which I know is not the case for everybody. But I do think it makes a case for like taking your time. It took me a really long time and to finish writing this book. And I know that some people would have felt anxious about the fact that like agents were contacting them and feeling the need to have to be like, let me just send you what I have, or, here, like quickly putting together a draft just so that like, they'll look at it and like, feeling like you can't miss this opportunity or whatever. But like for me, I was like, I want to take my time with this. I want to give you the best of what I have and making sure that it feels as good as I can make it by myself. And so I hope that like that is what made, you know, a difference. I mean, not to say that people don't labor over their work and not have the same experience. I think, the publishing industry is notoriously difficult. And so it is, a crapshoot sometimes. And then in terms of like working with my editor, it was a really great process. It it was hard only because I had done so many drafts by then that I was at the point where I was like, I actually don't want to look at this anymore. Like, can you please just take this from me and just do whatever you want with it and just send it out to the world? Because I cannot look at this ever again. I've looked at it for so many years now and over so many drafts. And it was really hard to like have to like sit through and like do big edits and then do like copy edits and then do like, I don't know, like past pages. It was horrible. Um, but I felt like she really helped me, cut out some of the fat and like figure out how to like structure things. Well, I mean, I didn't change the structure at all, but like we moved a couple of things around. As for the ending, when I said that I was fighting for the ending, um, my editor didn't have a problem with the ending, but I think there were people on the way, like had beta readers who were kind of like, I don't know how I feel about this ending. My agent, I think, was kind of like, okay, we can keep this ending, but like, have you thought about this? And I kind of had to be like, no, I really want it to be like this. Um, so I had a really clear sense of like what I wanted, and I think that helped because there were people who were kind of like, this is a little bit different, right? It's not what you would expect from an ending. And I was like, no, 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 like this is how I really want to make it work. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I know it's your book and I'm sure you enjoyed the whole thing, but I would like to know, is there any portion of the book that you actually enjoyed more in while writing it?
Yeah. Oh my God, that is such a good question. Trying to think if there's something that I enjoyed more. I really liked writing different parts for different reasons. I liked writing the beginning, like with the seniors at like the wedding, or not the wedding, the birthday party, because it was fun. It was just like fun to write these like bickering people and like trying to get a sense of like what they're like, what their lives are like. Um, but I will say that like the parts that I felt the most momentum behind were the parts that like moved me personally. So like one of my favorite parts was writing like Highwind's last chapter, which I don't know if everybody has read the book, so I don't want to like say too much about it. But it is like a chapter between him and his mother. And that part was really emotional for me to write because, it was this like intimate moment between Hywen and his mother and like, knowing that, they might not be together forever and like whatever. And I base that a lot upon like my own idea of what it might have been for my grandfather, when he looks back upon, of course, he didn't know that he was going to be gone for his mom for as long as he was, but just when he looks back upon his times with his mother, the nostalgia that he might carry, or like the heartbreak that he might carry, and like my own understanding of my relationship with my mom and what would it feel like for me to know that like I'm going to be separated from her soon. And similarly, like the last chapter that I just referenced in the book, like that was really emotional for me to write. I actually cried when I wrote it. um just thinking about like what does a mom's love look like, even if her son is, again, I was thinking my grandfather, but then I was thinking it from his mom's point of view. Like we learned that his mom was calling for him on her deathbed, and I was trying to think like what does it feel like to be that mom and to wonder about your grown child and if he's okay and not really knowing what that looks like, but never really being able to let that go. You know, like that love endures no matter what, no matter how long it's been. And that is a mother's love for her child. So um those are the parts that felt most honest to me, I guess, in some ways. And so therefore I enjoyed, I guess enjoy is a weird word, but you know, it was really, I was really submerged in the book at that point in time, and it felt very personal to me when I was writing it.
Thank you so much. You know, it's a fun question I would love to ask. Like when Carissa is not writing, what does she do? I know you have a 2 years old, so that's a big job.
Yes.
But
Yes.
what your I would like to know about your hobbies, your
Yeah.
passions.
Yeah.
Sometimes that influence your writing.
Yeah.
You don't even realize that in some unexpected ways it happens. So I
Yeah.
would like to know that.
Yeah, no, I love that question. It's so funny because writing used to be my hobby. And then I made it a profession, and now I have to find another hobby. Um, you know what I really love doing is I love doing aerial silks, which I don't know, people confuse it with like aerial yoga, but it's like this, like it's like Cirque du Soleil, although I'm like not good like Cirque du Soleil. Okay, it is not. I'm not at those levels, but it's like I really enjoy this like it, experience of like having to like learn to do tricks in the air with this like basically these two pieces of fabric, which feels a little bit crazy, but it's it really makes me feel like powerful. I feel strong when I do it. I'm not elegant. I'm not flexible. Like there are women who do it and they're like dancers and they look so beautiful when they're doing it. I do not like that. Like when you see videos of me doing it, it's like you can see the struggle. You can see me like really fighting for these tricks. But it makes me feel really powerful. It makes me feel really accomplished because like when I see my progression, a trick that I couldn't do 4 months earlier, now I can do it and I can see the difference. I video myself so I can see the difference in my abilities. It makes me feel, it really scratches that like goal oriented itch of like, okay, I've done something, I've accomplished something, and I'm getting better. I will say that like I said, I had a baby, so I was doing it a lot before I had a baby, and then I had a baby, and now I'm very weak again, and I sort of have to start all over again, which is very demoralizing. But I feel like it's a good lesson, in perseverance. And it's kind of like writing. It's like I wrote this whole book, I gave birth to it, and now I want to write another book, and I have to start all over again. And like you feel like you accomplished this thing, and like no, like we're starting from scratch again. So like that's how I feel about aerials too. I'm like, I'm starting from scratch. I have to like rebuild all my muscles and I have to relearn all these tricks. But I'm a little bit better off for it because I've done it once before. And I feel like writing is kind of the same.
Great. We do have another question in the chat. In your opinion, how will the written word evolve throughout your lifetime since everything is so temporary? Audiobooks, ebooks, and other seemingly disposable forms.
That's a really good question. I don't know. I don't feel like I think about that much. You know, I'm sure that there will be new things, just in my lifetime, right? Like we've seen ebooks, and like that was people were like ebooks are gonna be the death of like the print word, but like that hasn't been true. Audiobooks are having, I think a renaissance period, and I feel like people are listening to audiobooks more and more, and they're like on the rise, which I actually really love because audiobooks are great for mom with toddlers. Like I can listen to it while I'm doing chores. But otherwise I don't get a lot of writing done or reading done anymore because I just don't have the time. Um, but who knows? Like I think, there's AI, which is weird, and we're still trying to figure out like how that fits into everything. For me as a writer, I think I try not to think about a lot of that noise. Maybe when I'm like 80 years old, like things will be a lot different. But I feel like, well, this is who I am. This is like I'm a product of my time. And so I write, this way. And like I already write different than like probably, than people used to, right? I'm not using typewriter. I don't actually write in a notebook. Although I do like I know lots of writers do, but I actually write everything on my laptop, and that's the way that my brain works. You know, who knows what it will be like, but for me, like I just try to think about like I'm just gonna do my work the way I know how to do it, and I will adjust if I need to as things appear. So I know that doesn't really answer the question quite, but I don't know.
Thank you so much. I think when you write it on a laptop, you have always saved your work as a backup because technology can
Yeah.
be challenging.
Yes, I save it to the cloud immediately.
And you know what's happening with in everywhere like book banning and everything. So I was wondering, do you believe that this book banning can influence any authors like writing choice or topics that they pick in any way or any form?
I can only speak for myself. I mean, I don't know how other writers are reacting to it. But for myself, I am aware of it, of course. But for me, like what I write has never been dictated by like the market or, what, I think will be palatable. I remember when I started writing this book, over 10 years ago, I thought to myself, I'll be lucky if I sell this book to, a small publisher maybe, because at the time I think, Asian American literature was still, still sort of finding its footing among, the major publishing, or, whatever you want to call it. I don't even know what to say about it, but I feel like at the time people are used to hearing a certain kind of immigrant story or like a generational story, and I was really seeing like not that many Asian American stories. There were definitely were, but they were of a certain vein, or people expected a certain to be a certain way. And for me, I was like, I don't even know if anyone would be interested in this story. Like, who wants to read a story that actually doesn't mostly take place in America, that, is about this war that nobody in the West cares about or really knows, and like, is using these languages that nobody speaks, or like whatever. Like, I was like, I feel like I'm not going to be able to sell this book, but this is what I want to write. So I'm just going to write it. And it will, wherever it lands is where it lands. And like, but at least I'm being honest to myself, and I think I will continue to do that, right? Like if whatever I write next, it may or may not be something that is, of interest to publishers. It may or may not be something that like people want to ban by, these evil governments. But I can only be me, and I can only write my best if it's something that I'm interested in, that moves me, that I love, that I think is important to me. So I'm just going to keep doing the work.
I have a question for you. It's kind of a two-part question in a way, but about your publishing, your kind of literary life, and then your own life in two different kind of continents. So, like we know each other, for example, for more than a decade from the New York City like, literary Asian American, literary
Hmm.
scene. Since we're both writers, and I know you mentioned like a lot of agents contacted you, but while you were writing the book and stuff. So did living in New York City or having, being part of that world help you think in terms of having exposure to getting your work kind of out there or more likely to be published? Um, and how is the scene, say, in Taiwan different for you? And the second thing is, in terms of your own life, kind of having two homes in a sense, New York City slash New Jersey, and also Taiwan. Like, how has that influenced you in relation also to what you're writing about, which is these people who have been kind of displaced in so many places in your book, right? In
Yeah.
China, in Taiwan, in the US.
Yeah.
So like how does your own how do you think your own life is reflective of that?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a two-part question. In response to your first question, I'm sorry, my like husband's, it's like 6 in the morning here, and my husband's
And
alarm
we
is going
appreciate
off.
you being here, by the
Sorry. Oh, it's
way.
7 in the morning. So my husband's alarm is going off and he's not turning it off. Um, but for the first question, I will say that I think that being in the New York literary scene made me feel like it was helpful as a baby writer, but I don't know if it actually was, in the sense that like it was dynamic to be part of, a literary scene where I could go to readings, I could like hear authors speak. Back then we obviously didn't have like Zoom events, so it was great to be able to like go see new authors, talk to them, get my book signed, hear about them, talk about the writing. I did get to like meet, some people that I think I otherwise wouldn't have met, and like make a small community for myself, which I do think is really important. I find community to be something that is invaluable in terms of supporting this otherwise very solitary work. Um, so it did feel at the time, especially when I was a young writer, to be something that was very helpful for my sense of myself as a writer, to make me feel like, okay, I can do this because I see other people doing it, and I can talk to people about it, and it feels real, right? Whereas but I don't know if it like, tangibly made that big of an effect. It wasn't like I got my agent through going to these events or whatever. I'm sure some people do meet agents and things like that, but for me it wasn't. My agent lives in Seattle. um, and it wasn't like I met publishers and so like they were interested in my book. But I do think it probably helped in small ways where I would meet somebody and they'd be like, oh, I have a small magazine, like a literary magazine, like, do you want to submit to me? Like things like that, I think it was helpful. Um, in terms of your other question about living in Taiwan, um, I don't have much of a literary community here that much. I'm sure there is an existing community. I'm not that big of a part of it because it's probably very local and their concerns are probably very different than mine. I do know a couple writers and stuff like that, but I will say that living in Taiwan has really informed this book in particular because I have a really good sense of what it's like to be in a new country and not speak the language that well and have people laugh at you or confused or like just flat out like the humiliation of like they just said something to me and I don't know how to answer because I have no idea what you just said, or like furtively like looking up words before somebody like on a menu before somebody comes and takes my order, like things like that. And so in that sense I was like, okay, I can empathize with what's going on with my characters because like this has happened to me personally for quite a number of years, and learning how to embrace that and learning how to make a new life for myself with like a new community um, was something that I understood on that level as well, and like being like, okay, I also am creating a new home the way that my characters are, obviously not nearly on the same level, like they are dislocated by not by choice, whereas mine was very you know voluntary. But at least on that level, I felt like I understood.
Great. We have a final question in the chat, and then we probably have to end since it's almost 7. If the book is based on some aspects of real life, how did your immediate family feel about it? In short, did you get a loving pushback or strong support, and did it matter?
That's a really great question. So actually my book is, even though it was inspired by my grandparents, and I might have taken like a detail or two from, their lives or whatever, it was mostly largely fictional. Like my grandfather was not in the army. He did not, have this like secret girlfriend, at least as far as we know, maybe he did. But he didn't have this girlfriend that he was separated from. So I think my family was like mostly okay because it was pretty much fictionalized. But they have the tendency to like look to see themselves places. They're like, oh, was this character based on me? And I was like, no, this character was not based on you. So don't read too much into it, please. So yeah, like luckily I think that I did enough distance, so they were okay with it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So yeah, thanks for being with us. Please join us next week. We have another Asian American author named Ming Chang, who's the author of Cecilia. So hope you'll join us for that. I really appreciate you being here, Carissa. I know it's really early in the morning there. And I really appreciate your talk. And I think we all learned a lot about your book. And please do check out Homeseeking when you get a chance if you haven't read the book already.
Thank you so much. It's really lovely to be here and chat with you guys. I think I mentioned this on an Instagram post, but the Queens Public Library was a library I grew up with, and I have
Oh,
very fond memories of it. I would go to the Flushing branch every weekend. And so it's very meaningful for me to be invited on here. So thank you very much.
thank you, Carissa, and thank you, everyone, whoever is here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.